Morning. Chairman Ames has a personal conflict and will not be able to chair the meeting, so he has asked me to pinch hit for him, and I'll do just that by calling this morning's Public Planning Committee meeting of Thursday, October 27th, 2022 to order. Krista, have we complied with freedom of information?
Yes, sir, we have.
Thank you. Would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mrs. Becker? Here. Mr. Stanford?
Here.
Mr. Lennox?
Here.
All present, sir.
Thank you. You have in your packet minutes from August 31, 2022. Are there any changes, additions, or deletions?
Move adoption as written.
Thank you. A second? Second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I will abstain, Krista.
Thank you.
Do we have appearance by citizens?
No, sir. At this time, I did not have anyone sign up to speak or address the committee at today's meeting.
Okay. Under new business, we have 4 items. The first is an update on short-term rental ordinance and program. Missy.
I didn't do anything.
Excuse me.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
You have to know the secret handshake, Missy.
That's right.
Okay, you're good to go. Sorry
Thank you.
about that.
No problem. My name's Missy Lewick. I'm the Community Planning Manager. It is nice to be in front of you this morning to talk about short-term rentals. So this update, I'm going to cover the implementation efforts of the short-term rental ordinance that was adopted, and I'll cover some of the operational staffing and coordination with our software vendor, and also explain some of the future next steps. So since the ordinance has been adopted, we have established a short-term rental implementation team. And you can see that it's an interdepartmental group. We have finance, community planning, code enforcement, GIS, and communications on the team to implement this effort. Also, just to give a reminder of what the ordinance entails, but the short-term rental ordinance was adopted in May, and it requires now a short-term rental permit, as well as establishes regulations for parking, noise management, trash storage and removal, as well as establishes a process for complaints and tracking and violations. So after the ordinance was enacted in May, it was enacted with an effective date of January of 2023, so that we had time to build in the necessary steps to implement the ordinance. And one of those was to establish some additional staff capacity. We hired a revenue customer service manager, Barbara Wooster, as well as our director of public safety, Bob, I saw earlier. As well as we're able to execute a contract with the software vendor, GovOS, to help us implement the short-term rental portal, manage all of the listings, verify their accuracy, and really assist us through implementation. So we had a kickoff meeting with GovOS, and we've been working with that large short-term rental implementation team with them. We are meeting weekly as a group to work through all of the implementation steps. Some of the progress that we've made currently, we are currently actively seeking additional staff, including 3 temporary administrative assistants and additional code enforcement officers. We are working on the short-term rental portal, and that includes establishing interdepartmental workflows and processes, as well as finalizing our Good Neighbor brochure and other collateral that's required to go along with the ordinance implementation. Also, one of the major key points that we're working on is we're working with GIS on an application that will help with the site plan requirement. So all of the single-family short-term rentals are going to have to turn in a site plan that shows where their parking is located, as well as their trash location. And so GIS is creating an app to assist people with that site plan requirement. What's coming up? In November, next week already, we are going to launch some public information meetings, 2 meetings on November 3rd and 1 on November 17th, and we will have additional meetings as well through our communications and outreach efforts to inform short-term rental owners and operators on what these permit requirements are. We'll have step-by-step processes as to how to utilize the portal when it's launched. And so those meetings are going to be starting already next month. We're also working on the workflows for the complaint hotline and how the software company will handle that by developing phone scripts, depending on what that complaint is, how it gets routed, and how we handle it. We're also going to move into software testing in November and December. We're going to have some staff training, and then we're going to create the standard operating procedures for those temporary positions that will be assisting the public with and reviewing all of the applications that come in. And then in December, we will work with GovOS to prepare registration letters to alert everyone as to the portal's opening in early January. And so really we're preparing for the portal to go live on January 3rd of next year. That is my quick update of where we are with implementation of the short-term rental ordinance. Do you have any questions?
Missy, I'm interested in whether GovOS has done any work in terms of determining the number of short-term rental units are out there. Have they been doing that research?
They are actively doing that research right now, and in early December we should have some data. What they're doing now, our GIS division gave them our parcel data, and they're working to match all of those advertisements that are out there with our parcel data. And so we should have that fully scrubbed in early December, and we'll be able to produce some of those maps.
Excellent. That'll be fascinating conclusion.
Yes.
Amy? Alice?
I have no questions at this point. Thanks.
Any comments from
I've got a
the...
question. Mr. Chair, thank you. It seems like we'll be speeding up here as far as getting information in front of us based off of the capabilities of the software. There was one charge set out that we have not really talked about, and that was the placement of this advisory committee. Is that within the timeline somewhere?
So this is implementation of the ordinance that was enacted.
Sure.
And certainly there was discussion of a future phase where we would enact an advisory committee, and we would look at some additional regulation or look at high occupancy short-term rentals, and that process we haven't yet started. Okay. So we're looking sometime in early next year after we have this launched and underway to move into phase 2.
Yeah, I'm I guess maybe getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but as Councilman Stanford had asked a question about the number of units, I think once that heat map gets in front of us, that we really know what's out there, that's going to really start to percolate discussions and reactions and that sort of thing. So I want us to be prepared to have qualified discussions around it. So I think that phase of the advisory committee and how we format discussions moving forward is important for us to start thinking about.
Yes, sir. Okay. So the phase 2, the main components that were identified in that we haven't yet started were to establish an advisory committee on short-term rentals, examine high occupancy short-term rentals, examine high floor area ratio, single-family structures, examine occupancy limits, review of Saturday check-ins, as well as the impacts of the increasing number of short-term rentals and how that trends towards the future. So that's all in a future phase, but it's not yet on the immediate radar, but it's coming soon.
Missy, can I ask for clarification on that? Was that something that was directed by the committee to move forward with as a sequential, or was that something that was going to be brought back for further discussion as to whether or not we move forward?
Oh, yes, it would be brought back. Certainly we needed the data, which we're going to have soon. And once we get that data, then we'll determine
whether
where we
phase 2 is a necessity.
Correct. Yep.
So there's an if there. Okay. Thank you.
Missy, the letters generated by GovOS go out the first week in December. So that pretty much puts a time specific for identifying the number of short-term rentals. Okay.
Yep.
Any comments from the public? Peter.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't come for this particular item, but this is in our wheelhouse. Obviously, these are first steps, and we're going to see how these work. And enforcement, as Missy pointed out, is going to be the key. It's great to have rules and regulations, but if you have no enforcement, it's not going to work. Obviously, most of the people in this room and on this island were once tourists, and they support the lifestyle that we all enjoy. However, there needs to be a balance. And as we go through this, and I've said this over and over again, if there's an opportunity to meet with all the folks who control the bulk of the short-term rental market, if there's an opportunity to convince them to stagger their check-in days, it would go a great way to eliminate a lot of the problems we are seeing with both traffic and services on the island, because the majority of the folks leave at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, and the majority of the folks check in at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. That could be staggered just over 2 days. Instead of having Saturday to Saturday, have Friday to Friday and Saturday to Saturday, and even Sunday to Sunday. Many other communities like ours that are resort in their orientation and in their economy do the same thing. And it can be done on a voluntary basis without an ordinance, or you can incentivize it by giving folks a break on their business license if they do it the right way. Just a suggestion. I've made this suggestion for 10 years. It's never gotten any traction, but it's something to consider. Thank you for the opportunity.
Any other comment? Okay, thank you. Back to the Diaz. Missy, no action is required. Thank you. New business item number 2, introduction of the strategic plan item to identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of Hilton Head Island resiliency. Jeff Buckaloo.
Yes, sir. I need help here, Krista.
Oh.
Why I went back to this.
Just click down to the bottom. Oh, and they're all gone. Just come down here. Oh, goodness.
Okay, good deal.
There you go.
Good deal.
Thank you. Oh, here. Okay.
Yeah, looks right.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Jeff Buckaloo. I'm the town engineer. Happy to be before you this morning. What I want to present is, this is a strategic action plan initiative. And so I want to give you an outline, an overview of where we are today and where we're going. And no action needed on this item either, although I would like feedback. So if you have any questions, ideas that pop up along the presentation, please interject and let me know, and I'll try to document those, and going forward we will
Jeff, would you prefer we wait until you're
no, I think
finished,
as we go it may be helpful, and we'll track those, and I'll try not to take too long. This is taken directly out of the strategic action plan. Purpose statement, why we're doing what we're doing. I was speaking with one of our residents before the meeting here about, we're a little late to the game. I've gone to conferences, of course, and been around and seen so many plans already in place. And so it's a good thing that we're doing it now, and very excited to be working on it. Comes from the comp plan also. This was approved a few years ago. There was a goal regarding resilience, so they outlined steps we should take. And that's really was the basis for this strategic action plan initiative. Primary goals and objectives, I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide. I put together a statement up here. Improve the resiliency of the island against threats of climate change and sea level rise to better protect our residents, infrastructure, public and private assets, natural environment, quality of life, with recommendations for near, mid, and long-term actions. And as you look at a lot of these plans, that's the way most people do it. They will have near, mid, and long-term actions. And right now, as we build the plan and develop it, we will hone in and select those. But right now, I would probably say 2030 would be near term, 2050 midterm, and 2100 long term. We're almost in 2023, 2037 years away. So to implement some of the near term action items and budget and build those, I think that's a doable thing. But those are kind of the timeline, the milestones I have in mind for the near, mid, and long-term actions. The extents of the plan, of course, will be the town limits, causeways and bridges to the mainland, of course, very, very important. The schedule, as outlined in the Strategic Action Plan, we just started here a month or two ago. We're going to run the first phase up through the second quarter of next year, and then begin the second phase. And I'll speak more to the schedule here near the end of the presentation. And the stakeholders, of course, the citizens, property owners, visitors, utilities, all the government agencies, healthcare, business owners, et cetera.
Jeff, before you go
Yes.
away from that slide, where is that picture taken?
That is Singleton Beach. That is on a king tide. And so,
I didn't understand you. It's where?
Singleton Beach, at the end of Singleton Beach Road. Yes, sir. So, very impactful picture there. Partnering. As I said, a lot of people have done a lot of work already to date. These are the main agencies. I've been speaking with South Carolina Office of Resiliency. They have a resiliency planner, Hope Warren, who I've been communicating with, and she's been very helpful. The Sea Grant Consortium, that is really the universities of South Carolina that can apply science and folks working on protecting the coast, doing things along the coastline. That is a very good agency. They compile plans, data, and other useful information. And so I'll be working with them. NOAA, of course, they've got all the climate data. That's the best source of data. And FEMA, through Homeland Security, they have grants, frankly, and funding and other plans and ways we can help. And so we have applied for 2 grants, to let you know. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and then the BRIC Grant, Building Resiliency and Infrastructure in Communities. And because we got shortlisted for one of those grants, the other one, they said, we're going to take you off the list and put you on that. And so anyhow, we should know in a few months whether we're successful in winning that grant. Critical infrastructure facilities. We have lists already in place for our emergency action plan, debris management operations, et cetera. So we have those lists. I will refine that and vet it and make sure this is the proper list for resiliency. But as you can imagine, utilities, all the service providers, transportation systems, our storm drainage system, I'll talk a little bit about that, and then healthcare and public facilities. I know Mr. Brown, during the beach management presentation, asked the other day about, we're looking at the front end, the Atlantic-facing infrastructure that is the beach. But on the back end, as the tides rise, our storm drainage systems, we've had a stormwater utility in place for 20 years. We have 4 major pump stations. What we can do on the backside to protect, the sea level coming up and in there, the main weapon or tool, backflow prevention for these pipes and ditches that drain out into tidal waters. There's all kinds, different kinds of gates and valves you can prevent backflow coming back up into the system. So retrofitting a lot of those outfalls with better backflow prevention, maybe more pump stations in our future. That one in the bottom photo is Wexford Plantation, right at the border of Long Cove and Wexford as it empties into Broad Creek. We have a massive structure back there. We have 2 big pumps. We have gravity culverts draining out as well. We have an emergency diesel generator up there. The pumps themselves are hardwired into a transformer from Palmetto Electric. But should the power go out, we've got a diesel generator back up to operate those pumps.
How did these hold up during Irma?
Good. They held up. Well, we had an issue back at this particular pump station where the surge, the tide came around through the Long Cove side and flowed back over. And so to prevent a recirculation of water, we built up a berm to better make this more functional and resilient. But yeah, that was one of the things we did then. And as we look at future projections for sea level rise, there may be more of that in store for us.
Jarvis Creek has a major facility also,
Yes, sir.
and it ran into a problem in Matthew that no one could have expected.
Yeah, right, a freak anomaly. Yeah, during that, there is a box culvert under US 278. I think it's 8 foot high by 12 foot wide or something like that. Maybe not that large of a dimension, but anyhow, a truck bed liner, a big plastic truck bed liner, floated up and wedged and mashed against the culvert opening. And so, a few hundred feet down, you've got a multi-million-dollar pump station pumping, and you had this freak blockage. And so,
But
yeah.
have you put some sort of system there that would prevent something like that from happening again, like a screen, for example?
That particular one, we do not have a screen on there now.
Is the answer.
Yeah, we've told folks to clean up their sites and tidy up and not leave loose things out there. But we're working on, part of the resiliency is some better screening for those pump stations. The one back at Wexford, even though these watersheds are mostly clean, you can get a freak occurrence, and a lot of it's going to be organic. It's going to be tree limbs and logs, et cetera. But we are in the process now of putting a bigger, better screen on the Wexford pump station, and we're going to look up there at Main Street in that one as well. This is another dramatic photo. This is Harbor Island, which is, in Beaufort County. But talking about existing studies and plans, we've been compiling other, from around coastal U.S. and even other countries, looking to see what they do and taking all those in. I'm going to do a benchmarking analysis, like what are the best parts of those plans, kind of what target. That is the key thing, I think, in all of this, is what target you pick on the sea level rise, right? So there's a lot of data out there. NOAA has all these projections, and the major categories they will say are low, intermediate, high, and high. And so you can pick one of those 5 curves, and they'll say in 10 years, this curve says it's going to raise this much. In 30 years, it's going to raise this much. And so, if you apply like the Goldilocks principle, you would think intermediate is most logically the choice. If you target too low of a scenario and turns out that, it really was too low, and generations later, they're having to redo and rebuild things that we did. You pick too high of a target, you overspend, maybe you don't have the funding, but you build unnecessarily. So that is a very, very key decision in this whole thing. What target scenario we pick, and intermediate seems to be, most common or most logical thing to pick. One of the things we did, we put a tide gauge out there. There's a group that's trying to get more tide data up and down the coast. And so I think it was $500 we paid for this thing. Solar power, shoots a beam down at the water surface and relays data back. This group has a website, you can go on and look up and down the coast and see how tide data is happening. We put this back at the Wexford Harbor on a concrete head wall there. And that's working well. We may get another one, just more data, more redundancy, put it somewhere else here.
What are you finding?
Excuse me?
What are you finding from the tide gauge?
Well, we're just monitoring, we could look at a surge, for instance, when Ian came, we could say, here's how high it was here. They look up in Georgetown, here's how it was there, et cetera. So nothing real eventful thus far, Ian came, but otherwise it's just checking the daily tides.
You measure water levels routinely, right?
Say again?
You measure the level of water routinely.
Through this tide gauge we do there. But they're not necessarily stream gauges throughout the system. So they're not a network of gauges with telemetry, et cetera. We have gauges at the pump stations, and we know, but this tide gauge is measuring.
I thought a while back we had data or comments from staff that you have been tracking the water level for a number of years.
We have water quality monitoring we're doing.
I'm wrong.
Something different? Okay. Town ordinances, went through and looked at the ones related to resiliency, anything, with building development, wetland protections, flood zones, et cetera. So I think there's opportunity room there to review all of these, update these, better protect future development, et cetera.
Jeff, back to the tide gauge. We only had to spend $500. It seems to me we should find 2 or 3 other locations to do that so that we can get better data, and if one of them happens to be damaged or whatever, then we'll still have the data coming in. So
Yes.
for that kind of investment, let's seriously look at getting more.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we'd like to get one on the north end and one down near the toe of the island.
I just want to second that. Part of my comments that I was going to make is that one location on the island isn't probably our best measure, but if we take the coastline, that would be a good place to maybe put 2 or 3 around the foot of the shoe.
Okay.
The other thing is, on 161012 rules of measurement, how does that relate to this? That's generally the way I know that particular ordinance. It has to do with the height of buildings, where we start measuring from sea level, mean sea level. How does that relate to this in particular?
That, we both base those on the NFIP, the firm federal insurance rate maps. Just wanted to look at it.
Okay.
So we'll look and see what the building elevations are being set at. Those models and mapping were redone. Just looking at future conditions. If we want to look at 2050 and 2100 and see, should we be, raising that? I think it's prudent during this exercise to look at that.
Okay.
This is the SWOT. This thing's called a SWOT analysis. And so the S is for strengths, W is for weaknesses, O is for opportunities, and T is for threats. And so, when you look at the strengths and say, well, we have good public interest, we have people on staff, floodplain manager, stormwater engineers, et cetera, and we'll be talking about a consulting firm later to help develop the plan. Current funding for initial studies, we budgeted $250,000 in our stormwater utility budget last year, this fiscal year that is. So we have that money right now. We've applied for the FEMA grant, which is $56,000 if we're successful, and we'll try to leverage that money with other grants if we have opportunity to do so. GIS and survey data, when other engineers and people come here to do projects, they're always very complimentary of our good data. We've done a good job, with LIDAR and topography data. Missy was mentioning parcel data. When these folks come here, they say a lot of times when they do these studies or these plans, half the battle is development of data, and it's costly and timely. And so we have good data, and as we go forward, a lot of this analysis will do with economic impacts, right? So we'll do cost benefits. If you protect all of these properties with these types of developments on them, you could spend X to protect Y and look at the cost benefits. And so I think that's a really strong piece of our arsenal here as we do this, is our good data. Established beach renourishment program. Some folks don't have it. Like we were talking about the other day, some communities, it's kind of every property owner for themselves, or they rely, on the government, the federal government that is, to come in and renourish with the Corps of Engineers. We have a program, we have a funding source, so the Atlantic front of the island is protected, and we can incorporate sea level rise into those future projects. The stormwater utility, we've had that program for 20 years. Yes, sir.
Jeff, back to my original question. What data do we have relative to sea level rise on the island?
Well, we have tide gauges. The nearest one was Fort Pulaski down there, so we would rely on that and what the Weather Service has. We have this new one we've installed back at Wexford, and so we're part of this group, this consortium that's trying to build data, get better data. So we have that going forward. But
What's it tell us?
Well, it's telling us what the tides are each day. And, when one of the measures they use is a mean high water tide. And so each day there's 2 high tides. It'll take the highest of that, and then it'll average them out. And they'll say, this is the mean high water.
Is the average increasing?
Well, we've only had this one a year. All the projections, the NOAA projections are that is increasing. But yeah, this is part of a group of data sets, a group of gauges. And so it's helping the folks up and down the coast to get this. But yeah, like you were saying, we will add a couple more just for redundancy and more data.
I think it gives us a lot of information that's specific to our island, which, granted, I understand people are doing it up and down the coast, but when we look at what's specifically happening here, we can more understand it and be prepared to.
And yeah, there is a bit of a variance from Fort Pulaski through here. So yeah, this is very, very site-specific, yes.
Wouldn't we be able also to collect some data from the beach renourishment projects in terms of where we see that high tide, that high water mark being, the amount of sand that's been added, and do calculations within that? It seems to me to be some relationship there that we might be able to gain some insight into our own beaches and where the water line is.
Yeah, they do hydrographic surveys, and we do a profile of the beach, where the sand is, how far out.
Right, but I remember
they will
the presentation, right.
One of the measures is the mean high water, and they say that's on average where the high tide gets to.
Right, but over time, we should be able to see whether or not that moves. So within that data, from having done this several times, there must be something there that would tell us, give us some insight.
Yeah.
Maybe not great insight, but some insight as a
Yes.
starting
And
point.
that, with this gauge, yes, will just be more data, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up on the line of thought here. I guess when I read strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, I guess I'm being pushy a little bit here, okay, Jeff? But bear with me, all right? I'm not sold on our strengths being actual strengths, okay? And back to the line of thought and questioning that's coming before you, the first slide that you showed us was one of Singleton Beach, okay? And I can remember when that development was not there, and the two little clubs down there, one was called Walter's Place, and on King Tide, you couldn't go to Walter's Place, okay? Because he had tide in the building, inside the building. So I'm not sure that we have established a true baseline to measure against, okay? Because what I saw in that picture was something that I am very rememberable of back in the 80s and 90s, okay? But from how many inches or feet, we have no idea, right? And I think as we start to talk about resiliency over the next 20, 30, 40 years, that baseline of data, which it says we have, I think we need to be very concrete and certain about what that is, okay, and how we really going to measure it. And the other one that I'm really paying attention to is this stormwater utility flood protection infrastructure. Now, there's been talk as I've attended most of the candidate forums about our infrastructure condition. All right. As a matter of fact, there's been a number thrown out a few times as to how much it would cost us to repair our current infrastructure system around stormwater. I'm not sure if you've got that number, Jeff, but the fact that the numbers being called out loud is concerning to me because I've never heard what it's going to cost us to bring our infrastructure up to par, right? I think there's opportunity in the infrastructure system that we currently have, but by no means are we cutting edge or state of the art at the moment, right? I think we want to get there, and when you look at our budget, I mean, that sliver of stormwater, I mean, that's not going to get us anywhere. So I think I'm looking at strengths, at least on this screen, as more opportunities as we start to dive into this conversation, because let's face it, it's in the strategic plan. To some degree, it's brand new for us. So I just want to make sure that the emphasis is put on that we are behind. We just don't know how far behind we are, right?
Yes, sir.
But that is a good question. I've heard that thrown out as well. Is there any place that we have a rough estimate or thought, or are these just people who are making assumptions?
When you say fix the stormwater system, I mean, is that,
Yeah.
It's a system that will break down and fail over time. There may be a pipe in Sea Pines that's fine today, and 5 years now it fails and corrodes and needs replaced. And so we, over 20 years, have done, dozens of capital projects, all of these pump stations, big concrete culverts under 278s and major roadways. And so we from the original master stormwater study back in 1995, we developed this big project list of deficiencies. And so over the decades, we've done dozens of these projects. And so where we have found, pipes too small, need a big pipe, can't rely on gravity, pipes and ditches, we need to build pump stations. So we've done that. And over time, yes, it's a recurring program. You need, like maintaining your car or anything, your house. So yes, there will be operations and maintenance costs as we do this, and to build resiliency, there may, be a lot more capital upgrades of, we used to think, we call it a tailwater condition. Where do all these systems empty out into? And that's your starting point. So if you pick a mean high tide and say, well, assume the water is going to be this high, we need to get all this runoff from our developed lands out there into the ocean. And so if we're going to pick a new standard and say, we used to think it was this high, well now, let's say, 30 years from now it's going to be this high. So all new developments, all new designs are going to have to be predicated on that. Then we're going to be upgrading some of the system. But yeah, I don't have a good number to say,
Thank you.
X million could just solve it, because it's an ongoing thing.
I think that's, thank you.
And
There is no number.
When I listed it as a strength, I see what a lot of other communities do. And we have taken the initiative to make agreements with, private communities. Usually the premise of most stormwater utilities is what qualifies for service is any system that conveys public runoff. So a drop of rain falls on a public road right away, and you trace that where it goes. It leaves the right of way, it goes through Mr. Brown's property, then it comes through Ms. Becker's property, and we say, your system's qualify. If you'd like to give us an easement, then the government has a program, we'll maintain that system, upgrade it, et cetera. So what most communities that have, I'll say cities or counties that have private communities, they don't go in there. They say, you chose to live in a private community, maintain your own infrastructure. What we have done, though, we have agreements, and we go into communities and we maintain their systems. So for us looking at a island-wide approach, and we have these agreements, and I think it's a good thing, right? And we have a devoted stormwater fee. We could up that if we need to, right? But it's a good thing. I think we're starting from a good point that we can address resiliency through these measures.
Jeff, I haven't heard an answer yet on, do we have a measure of sea level rise? And is that correct?
Well, there are NOAA projections. We put this gauge in last year, and we can go to the charts and see what NOAA is projecting, et cetera. But
I think it is incumbent on the town to draw a baseline.
yes.
We can call it January 1, 2023, where that tide gauge or those tide gauges are reading. And then we can look at that with a report from you periodically saying that, it's risen by 1/4 of an inch in the past year. That is the kind of data that we need in order to do proper planning. So I suggest that you draw that baseline. Now,
We have that in NOAA. Yeah, we're going to pick a 2020 baseline and say, all right, 2030, they're projecting, the intermediate scenario goes up this much. 2050, it goes up this much. So yes, sir.
I have a lot of confidence in NOAA, but I want the town data. That's what I'm asking for.
Understood, and we will buy some more gauges, have those installed. Weaknesses, lack of a regional plan. I think as we do these types of things, working with other folks, and believe me, I'm going to talk to Beaufort County and Bluffton and share our information and data, and if they want to do similar things, Soloco, other groups.
Talk to Soloco.
Yes, I think, we don't want to waste individual efforts. We do something, they do something, so I think we can work together and get some synergy. The ordinance updates, we'll look at ours. We'll do so with the county as well. Talking about rainfall and statistics, I'm sure all of you watch the news and the Weather Channel, and you think, gosh, I've had 300-year storms in the last 5 years. And what the climatologists and hydrologists and folks will, they have these statistics. And so you have these rainfall curves, and you say, well, in any given year, there's a 1% chance we'll get this much rain. And, folks will call that a 100-year storm. And so there is, actions afoot to update those curves because, with the climate changes, we are seeing more and more frequent and intense storms. So when there is when the feds and the state, when folks agree on adjusting these curves and these projections and scenarios, we'll make that part of our stormwater regulations most likely as well. The 25-year storm used to mean this much rain in 24 hours. Now it means this much rain. And so we'll look at all of that as we update our ordinances. Opportunities, of course, we're always going to be looking, seeking out grants from the state and federal agencies. Opportunity to provide new guidance on development. Our land acquisition program, we could target low-lying lands, hope to, whether they're wetlands or what or other means there might be from keeping them being developed. This might be an opportunity for us to go ahead and buy them. And that storage, we look at where's the water want to go. If there are areas it's never going to be developed, the water can be stored there, no harm to anyone, then that's a good thing. Threats I just listed, degradation, failure of the infrastructure, of course, losses of property, increased flood insurance rates, coastal erosion, that's something we're combating with our beach management plan. Increased frequency and severity of all sources of flooding. I think that's what you see in the news and when you look at NOAA and climatologists' reports. Increased frequency and severity of saline intrusion. I mean, the PSDs have already been combating that and have resilient plans, I think. You have the reverse osmosis plants up at Jenkins Island, and South Island PSD has those. So they've already been dealing with that, making sure our freshwater aquifers are not contaminated with salt water, and we have plenty of drinking water. And then delays in funding issues going forward, just being diligent to keep on schedule and try to plan accordingly so we have funding to implement these things.
Jeff, just a question on the funding opportunity and engaging with state and federal programs. I know the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium that you mentioned earlier, there's I think it's called environmental social justice, where there's federal monies that are flowing down, right? And I guess I'm curious to know how we engage with the region, particularly the county, because I think the county would be able to support more of a need in rural areas like St. Helena, Ladies Island, and that sort, as far as resiliency. Particularly when you start to look at the economics and the income levels and that sort of thing, where on Hilton Head, it is somewhat more pocketized, right? I mean, we know we have levels of poverty that just in small pockets, and a lot of times we kind of ignore that. So I'm just curious how that relationship with the county will cement itself so that we are also eligible for these funds that are coming down. You don't have to answer me today, but I think that's important that we get our fair share as to money that's coming down will help us with this threat and the opportunity part as far as funding from the feds.
Yes, sir. Understood. Now I'll get with the grants administrator and see if we can work with the county and hopefully spread money they may be successful in getting as well. Here's the schedule. So we've been compiling other folks' plans, and I want to do a benchmarking analysis and report, take the best pieces and practices out of those plans, put into ours. I've got this tide gauge. I'll make that a critical section of the report that here's what the gauges are showing, here's the projections, et cetera, laying out, which ordinances do we need to look at and reconsider. Then going forward, critical structure identification. We'll get the goals, objectives, extents more complete and fleshed out, and compiling all the data that a consultant will need to work with and work with other communities. I expect to report back, to this committee or town council probably early in 23, sometime in the spring, we'll say, where we are and where we're going at that point. I mentioned we have $250,000 in the stormwater budget for, a consultant or outside work this year, and we're trying to get more monies through grants. Then by next summer, looking at code changes, we'll go through the proper committees and make recommendations, of course, using our wonderful communications group to put the word out to folks. Here's what to expect, where we have that data and we are honing in on these. This is the scenario we are going to target and use in our plan. And recommendations and budgets. That's going to be a key part of this plan, right? They're going to do the economic analysis, and when we show inundation for certain milestones or years under certain scenarios, the cost it's going to take, what are the best actions to take to protect those areas from flooding, and we'll have a cost benefits analysis for council to select and make decisions on, and then capital improvements program will be the vehicle to build those things. Identify proactive investments in public actions to enhance resistance. And we'll work with the finance department, as I say, going forward, once we do come up with ideas and plans, and I'm sure a lot of those projects will be costly and expensive. We'll have to develop a funding, see what the best funding source is for that. Will we have to bond or get grants or so on and so forth. And so there's a picture of Hunting Island, but that concludes my presentation. If there's any more questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Me, what are your comments or questions?
I would say thank you for your report. I think we've posed several questions to you already.
Yes.
And we'll look forward to the outcomes.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, is the fiscal 2022 stormwater annual report completed yet?
Yes, Jeff Netzinger is doing that. I understand we're going to do a workshop at some point to present the kind of the state of the program.
Good. I think there's an incredible amount of valuable information in that. Get that to council in advance of your workshop.
Okay.
And stormwater system is a target of frequent conversation. And I think it's important to recall that in 2016, 17, 18, we had back-to-back-to-back storms, and the system held up. There was the Black Swan event that you talked about, where that piece of plywood clogged the one system, but other than that, the system held up. So I don't see stormwater rising to the level of crisis.
Yeah, we're in good stead, I think, compared to most other folks. We have funding. We've been building capital projects. We've been maintaining the systems. And a lot of the localized flooding, when we have these events, it could be pine straw on the inlet down the street from your house that is the culprit. The pipes are big enough, the catchment system is in place, and it's just debris flowing to it. But, kind of the nature of our developments and how we live with the, a natural environment, there's a lot of leaves and pine straw around these systems.
For the public's benefit, the stormwater fee generates a little over $5 million a year. Of that $5 million, approximately half is new construction and maintenance, and the balance is debt service and operating costs. So it generates some income, certainly not enough to allow us to catch up with all the deferred maintenance that's needed. But it keeps the system running.
And yes, going forward, as we go through budget season in the spring of the year, one of the things we look at, projecting out 5 years out, do we need to raise the fee? We have not raised it in several years. I forget the last time.
7 or 8 years.
Yeah, yes, sir. But we look at that, and if we feel there's a need, a justifiable need, we would recommend that through the budget process.
Any comments or questions from the public? I'll bring it back.
Okay, sure.
Patsy.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity of commenting. When I saw Mr. Buckler this morning, I said, I wanted to give you a virtual hug to see this on the agenda. I've only been advocating for this for 4 years. And when I appeared at your strategic plan workshop, I saw this proposed for the first quarter of 2023, and I suggested it be accelerated. So the first comments I should have said are thank you, thank you, thank you. We are behind the times. I have pointed out a number of times that Beaufort County adopted a sea level rise adaptation plan in 2015, Folly Beach in 2017. As Mr. Buckley mentioned, a number of coastal jurisdictions have already adopted a resiliency plan. So I'm really excited today to see that we are moving forward with this. And I stand ready to assist with it. I know that there's a group working on a consortium on sea level rise adaptation for next spring. I think will be a great asset. Another thing I've advocated for is an eco-institute in cooperation with USCB. We have excellent resources here. The Sea Island Consortium has already been mentioned, and that's a great resource. The final suggestion, the final thing I'll say is a suggestion, and that is included in this timeline is hiring a consultant. Consultants can be great, but what I'm concerned about is not the cost. I understand there's funding for that, but the delay in coming up with a plan. There are lots of wonderful plans out there now that can be adapted specifically for Hilton Head Island because we have some expertise here to do that. So I would urge us to move forward with a plan and to call upon the expertise that we have here in South Carolina to develop that plan. And if we need to hire someone in the future to help us to come up with systems, fine, but let's not delay anymore. But thank you, thank you, thank you.
Patsy, in any of those plans you have in front of you, is there any data supporting sea level rise?
I don't have the full Beaufort County plan, but they are based on data. I don't have, just looking to see, there's a research and monitoring. All I printed out was the table of contents. Okay. The City of Folly Beach plan
don't have any data. Okay.
Does have, yes, City of Folly Beach has observed local tide gauge data, future sea level and nuisance flooding rates, and flood mapping. So there is some data, and I think that there are resources in developing local data as well as increasing the number of gauges that's been mentioned. Right. But I think we have access through USCB and University of South Carolina to assistance with research for data.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Heather.
Sorry, I apologize for running in and then running out. Councilman Lennox, I appreciate you bringing this to the agenda and for y'all's leadership on this. So one of the things, I have extensive experience in this across the state and in other areas. You really want to look at areas of persistent poverty when you're looking to get funding for this. Those are not competitive areas, and that is something that the funding is available for. We have 2, maybe 3 on Hilton Head. I think that there's only 2, and there's only 9 in the entire county. So that's where you want to focus in on first to get that money flowing from the feds. Once you get that going, you can attach it to all of the other different factors that you're working with. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter.
Just a couple of points, Mr. Chairman. What Jeff alluded to for that pump station over at Main Street, it was clogged by a bed liner from a truck, and you need a cow catcher there is what you need. If you have a flat surface, anything's going to go up against it, and that was the design, and I think they abandoned that design because they deemed it to be too expensive, but the same thing can happen again. And you need something there that's going to have the debris slide up. The stormwater management system we have in place now, in a static situation, every day rainstorms, works. It does need maintenance, as Jeff pointed out. When you have a major storm, water does not flow uphill. It doesn't. I stayed here with my staff during Irma, and the storm drains reversed. Know about floodgates, contraptions are going to stop the water from a tidal surge coming in, and that's just a fact of life. Unless you're going to pump the water up to a reservoir that has millions and millions of gallons of capacity with the expectation that electricity is going to be available to run those pumps, I mean, that's just common sense. The thing that disturbed me is that when the FEMA maps came out, the revised FEMA maps, they were based on pre-Matthew data, and they took a huge number of homes out of flood zones. And mortgage companies notified those property owners, says, we are no longer going to escrow your flood insurance payments because you're not required. And if you're not required, we're not going to escrow them. So if you want to buy flood insurance and you want to fund it, you have to do it yourself. Too many people dropped their flood insurance. And you saw what happened down in Florida where many people didn't have flood insurance, and now they have the handout. What are we going to do? I mean, that should be something that concerns us. There should not be anyone on this island who doesn't carry flood insurance. I don't care how high their home is. And the other thing we need to do is look at base floor elevation. You know, most of our island is built out. But when they rebuild or there's a new development looking at setting it higher, 6 inches would have made a difference with the people who flooded in the headlands because of that bed liner. Once that water gets into the first floor and starts to wick up, that's when all the damage occurs, and you get that water that goes up, you get mold, you get mildew, and you get all those other nasty things going on. So those are things that we need to advertise, that if you are in this town, you have to have flood insurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Back to the Diaz. Any other comments? Alex?
My mind started flowing based on some of the comments that came from the public, Mr. Chair. So I was regain my original comment. I'm going to pick up on something that Mr. Christian just said. You know, as we start to look at new development and changing potential heights, the other consideration there is because we are so close to build out, and the environment that has been built at the lower height could potentially start to get negative effects from the higher height. So, you know, that's a balance that we have to definitely keep in mind as, you know, the engineers look at approving future development. I was just going to go back to the maintenance piece. I think it's important. I think when we get to our workshop, we'll see that there's been fair spending from that fund inside the gated communities and outside the gated communities, okay? But I think there's a distinct difference because the planned unit development system has a management piece that is embedded in their way of doing business, and that doesn't necessarily happen outside of the gates. And I think that's where we start to see some of the disconnect as far as the negative effects of our stormwater system. So, I mean, in my mind, that falls into resiliency also in terms of the quality of life outside of the gates, right? Thank you.
Jeff, you wanted us to accept information and provide you feedback on strategies for the plan.
Yes, sir.
Did we do it?
Yes, sir. I've noted your comments and questions.
Anything to conclude or wrap up with?
No, sir.
Okay.
Specker has.
Thank you.
Tom, I just said one thing. I think there's some good news, and just correct me. Peter's points are well taken, but it wasn't that long ago that when we were looking at those flood maps that we acknowledged and we maintained our LMO, in fact, changed it just a bit to ensure that everyone across the island was preparing for an eventual flood, regardless of where their home was, and that the height was adjusted accordingly so that we did not lower any heights because of those projections that people were taken out, those flood plan projections that people were taken out of the floodplain. We maintained that height level across the board and made no changes to that. So there's some good news that we did not fall in line with those changes with the flood map, but instead maintained our height restrictions. So just wanted to point that out for everyone.
Thank you, Jeff. Good job.
Yes, sir.
Agenda item 3 under new business, a SWOT analysis on the island's solid waste and recycling. Committee, we are being asked to accept and review the information and likewise provide feedback.
Yes, sir.
Let me pull that up on my computer.
Got a bad screen here that's got a frowny face on it. That's not good. Yeah, this is similar to the last one. The same objectives and same request.
What'd you do to your computer?
I don't know, like I say, the message on the screen doesn't look good.
It was nice enough to give us a stat piece. Okay, let me see.
But yeah, this item as well comes from the strategic initiative plan. There we go.
Go ahead, you start talking.
Okay.
I'm gonna. Keep that.
Thanks. Oh. There you go. Yeah, same type of deal. There is a purpose statement in the strategic action plan, which basically, wants us to do a better job managing solid waste and recycling, work with the county, get a better handle on it. What is our future going forward with the landfill, how the waste and recycling is collected, and to do a better job, get our numbers up. Let me see 1 second. Okay, I just want to make sure where I was at. This is what comes out of the plan. Again, we started the same time here in the fall. You see the 4 bullet items in the plan: promote educational efforts to foster more recycling, composting, and litter control. We definitely, you could do a better job in that regard. And the county manages, they have a solid waste department division. I know they've made some recent hires to put people at the landfill to inspect what's being dumped off and dropped off. There's a communication, I think a public information person that's going to help as well. And we are engaging with them. They just approved a long-range solid waste and recycling plan here last summer. And so that's new and approved by County Council. We're going to look at it and work within it. If there's any changes we want on Hilton Head, we'll make recommendations to have that upgraded as they go. Creation of an off-island materials processing center that would facilitate better recycling rate, and it would really help the whole program. They call this a MRF, Materials Recovery Facility, Materials Recycling Facility, Materials Reclamation Facility, but it's called MRF in the industry. And what I've learned talking with these folks is that is a key to have one of those facilities in southern Beaufort County and have it up and running. And it is a live project. We got Neil Desai over here. He is the Beaufort County Public Works Director. And his solid waste and recycling division has a project where they're looking over at Simmonsville Road to acquire more land and expand that into a proper MRF facility. That once that's up and running, I think it'll be a big boon to the businesses and haulers that they have to go to the landfill or come back now. I think for everyone to have a place closer by, I think we'll get greater efficiencies and hopefully may even reduce cost, et cetera.
Give us a brief description of what a MRF does.
It processes all these.
Separate, is that what it does?
Yes, that's my understanding. So it'll be able to do recyclables and solid waste to sort and compact and process, and then move them on either to other outlets where they sell recyclable products, or stuff that goes in the landfill will then be transported there. But for the trucks to have to make a round trip to Hickory Hill and back, et cetera, it's just going to help make things more efficient.
May I ask a question? So it was my understanding from past presentations that the market for those recyclables really wasn't there. And so the cost benefit ratio wasn't high enough to make it something that any business wanted to take advantage of. Are we still in that, or has that changed?
On the markets today, we've got a fellow in the audience that I hate to ask him, but if that's okay, Mike Bennett is the island's representative on the county solid waste and recycling board. He runs a recycling company, and I think he would know much better than I the current state of the markets and what opportunity. Yes, sir, if you can. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I'm sorry. He's the expert, and he's been here for decades, and he knows that business.
Did I have that information wrong from prior presentations? Yeah.
No, not necessarily. So it is a market-driven business, industry, all the way around. The way to do it, though, is you function off of service fees and things like that to buffer that market. And so, yeah, you definitely have to plan accordingly. There are opportunities in the recyclable markets. We just came off a high swing. Mic, please. Oh, sorry. I should have learned that. I'm a bull in a china shop when it comes to this stuff. So like we just came off a real high swing, where markets were at their absolute highest that we've seen in about 15 years. And now we're going down to a downswing. So you can look at it any string of time and being 3-5 years, and it's going to go up and down. The trick is to buffer that or make the business resilient enough so that through service fees and timing and planning that you can you can go through those waves. So if you look at it in a small time, yeah, sometimes it doesn't make sense, and other times it does. I own a business, and that's what we do is recycling. So, we've learned to address it through service fees, processing fees, things like that. And so there is definitely a business to make sense of it. Right now, the current system doesn't work at all. So it's very dysfunctional, just through contracts and the way that Waste Management actually moves their material around. So the recovery facility on this agenda and the plan moving forward with the county is a very, very good solution to make it viable for our area to recycle properly. So
Thank you for the extra information. I appreciate it.
sure.
Thank you, Mike. And, oops, go to the next.
Is it?
On advance.
All right, you need the next screen.
There you go. And this came straight out of the comprehensive plan, like the last action plan item, strategic action plan item we had. It was born out of the comp plan. The comp plan in the environmental section said we ought to work towards a zero waste model. And zero waste, that's a very, very lofty goal. The way you get there, you try to, you have to have consumers, don't buy as much, don't buy things you don't need, reuse things, recycle, compost, et cetera. And so I think so much of this, what we can do good in this respect is a lot of education to teach people how to do it, ways to do it. I'll talk about some things later in the presentation that we will be doing here to help in that regard. Go ahead. And the partnering, mentioned Neil is here. We have been meeting monthly with the Greater Island Committee, Mike Bennett, Peter Christian, Neil Desai, and Cindy Carter, who is the county's public solid waste director. And so we've been talking about things in this action plan, talking about how the MRF is making progress, talking about the landfill, the county's negotiating a contract with Hickory Hill Waste Management, those types of things. So we meet monthly. It's a good group of people. Like I say, Mike and these folks are very smart on the industry and know what we're doing. So we've been doing that. The Greater Island Council has been most helpful. We have a resolution, the next item on the agenda after this. They have a Sustainability and Advisory Committee, which Peter chairs, and they do a lot of good work, have a lot of smart folks involved there. We go next. I mentioned the solid waste management plan that was approved this past summer by Beaufort County. It's online. It's on their website. You can look at it. They have 5 major distinct goals. You can see there. Secure disposal capacity. That's the landfill there. I understand waste management has plans to expand. They can build more cells and build up 20 more years of life. But we want to be in a position where we have opportunities and negotiate from a strong point there, and I think the MRF over here will help with that. Divert items banned from the landfill, transition to curbside collection for residents. On Hilton Head right now, it is completely a private market. We tried to run the curbside, solid waste and recycling pickup many years ago. That's when our town code was last updated in 2014. I will get to that. We need to update our town code to be more current and would like it to be, in sync with the county code as well. But going forward, that's a decision to make about trash pickup on Hilton Head Island. Leave it to the private market. I think the county has goals of wanting to manage curbside pickup throughout the county. So that's a decision, what we do here on Hilton Head going forward. Consider user fees for funding certain activities. Okay? And a bit about Peter's committee again. There's their mission statement. Those folks are all volunteers, and they do all this good work to assist the town and the county, to educate the residents and try to help our environment. Said this particular committee was created in 2011 by a mayor's task force. Strategic Sustainability Advisory Committee, they've been working with the county and the town. We meet monthly. Peter and Mike have been most helpful. good ideas, like I say, smart people with eagerness to help the community. Okay. I just mentioned this, but our town code is outdated. You know, it speaks to a time when we were managing the solid waste curbside pickup here on Hilton Head Island. And so I think we want to amend that. I did a recent inquiry with all of the haulers. You know, there are 6 licensed haulers on Hilton Head Island right now. 4 of them do the residential solid waste and recycling hauling. And so I was collecting data, you know, tell me how many customers you have, how many tons you're picking up each month, et cetera. And part of the inquiries, you know, it's in the town code, they have to supply this data, but part of the inquiries were from Councilman Ames, who had asked about, I'm hearing constituents who say, I wonder if the recycling is being done properly. And what I found, I mean, a lot of it is an education and information problem. And I talked to the companies that run these businesses, and they will tell me their protocols and procedures. And I think the public perception may be, you look out your kitchen window, you see someone putting everything in one bin and taking it to the truck. Well, what the business owners would tell me is if someone recycles and has trash pickup, the driver may go out back and he has a singular bin. If they are doing things properly, they put their loose recyclables in a bin, glass, plastic, paper, aluminum, et cetera. He would dump that in a bin, and then bagged garbage he would just throw on top of it. Go back to the truck. They may have a split truck. You put the trash, household garbage on one side, you go put the recyclables on the other side. But for the person looking out the window, it says the driver put all of that in the same bin. Or he went out and he put all of that in the same truck. So I don't think they're doing it right. I don't think they're separating it right. So better education. They need to put, the haulers that is, I think, put the information on their website, you know, send pamphlets in their invoicing. Here's what we do and here's how we do it. So there's no confusion or false perceptions. One problem, though, when they get to the landfill or the processing center to take the materials, the county subsidizes the tipping fees. So when they dump household trash, they get reimbursed from the county for dumping that trash. When they're dumping the recyclables, they don't. They have to pay a fee. So you say, well, could they, you know, as a business practice, say, I'm going to take it here and get reimbursed? Well, that potentially could happen, right? Part of it, though, the hauling companies would tell me, contamination of the recyclables. If the consumers, if the customers are putting stuff in there they shouldn't, and the load gets contaminated, then the processing center won't take it. It has to go to the landfill. So if 9 people on the road do it properly and everything's clean and it goes in, the 10th person has a full ketchup bottle and some other things that explode, and they get to the site, the driver will either have discretion to say this is contaminated, or if the processing center won't take it, it goes to the landfill. So there's, I think, education, as long as folks know what the protocols are. If we could have some oversight and regulation, as I said, the county is hiring a full-time employee who's going to be positioned out there at the landfill to help in that regard. So there's definitely room for improvement. If we go to the next, here's the SWAT again. You know, I mentioned the good work Peter and Mike and the folks at the county are doing to help us. I think that's a strength. Weaknesses, you know, ever since I've started working on this, the talk of the Southern County MRF is just huge. It's very, very critical and will do a lot of good, as you heard Mike say. Updating our ordinance, want to make it consistent with the county ordinances. I think that helps the haulers and the businesses, right? If we have a similar ordinance to Bluffton, to the county, if they have to do different things for different people, they're going to adjust their prices, and it may get confusing and not work as well along the way. Want a long-term agreement with the county to run the convenience center at Summit Drive. I think that's important. We own the land, and we lease it to the county to operate that facility there. But I think we need a better long-term agreement to ensure that will happen for a long time. And in public education, we have a good communications department I mentioned earlier, getting the word out on what to do and how to do it. I think in general, the nature of our citizens and residents are they want to do the right thing, they want to do good, and with regards to recycling. But what are the rules? How do you do it? Make it easy for the haulers to collect it and process it the right way. And a lot of that's just education and communication. The MRF, Neil's here. He can give an update if desired, but that is a key project, and it is in the works. They have funding. They're working on it, so great news for us. I think we can do better. Commercial recycling is an issue. The short-term rentals, the turnover. You know, folks from out of town, do they care as much? They're just in and out, and they throw everything in one bag. I think if we can help with education and get folks to do a better job in that regard, and the public education I mentioned. And here we are on the SWAT schedule going forward. Been meeting with these folks each month, and I think that's a good thing. The long-term agreement to keep the convenience center in operations long-term is something I'm working on. I'll work with our legal department on that, and we'll get that ready and present to the county. Updating the ordinances. I've got some ideas. We've looked at it and talking with the county. We'll get that in better shape and get those to match. The next item on the agenda is a Greater Island Council resolution. You know, wanted to get it done by the end of the year, by January. That's why that date was up there. And I'll work with our communications department to get a full-fledged campaign. The county has a person who, you know, that is her job as well. And so we'll put that on the website and social media, and we'll try to do a much better job getting the word out for what people should do in that regard. And work with Beaufort County on opportunities for improvement. Again, if there's something we would like them when they update or amend their solid waste management plan to include, we can do that. And I mentioned something on the end. There was a project, you know, in which we were going to do roadway modifications, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we were looking at putting a roundabout out there at Gateway and Summit, and we own Summit Drive, and we own the property there. The fear was that with the new decal system, it may cause traffic backups, and you know, it has not transpired to be as bad as thought. You know, we don't see people out the Dillon Road necessarily, maybe on a busy Saturday morning. But for the most part, the county has made do with the existing infrastructure and is making it work. I think we could do better. You know, there's an intersection that a roundabout would be made better. There's developable land still down at the end. You have Arbor Nature at the end with a lot of big trucks coming around that curve. So anyway, I think that's a worthwhile project going forward. You know, Mr. Brown mentioned before about the ability for anyone to recycle, not just decal holders. You know, renters, whoever, if you wanted to go do a good thing and help the environment and recycle, you should be able to. And so the county has stationed their scanner, the decal scanner employee up at the top of the hill. So, you know, it's a workaround. I think reconfiguring that facility and doing some infrastructure improvements could make it better. There's talk about, you know, if we could do more organic recycling and composting in an area. So in a future CIP, I think, you know, there's a worthwhile project out there at the convenience center that we should look at. And that's what I have.
Questions from
Yes, sir.
the committee?
I would like to hear from our friend from the county about the systems that are in place and the efforts that are underway between the town and the county.
This is Neil Desai. He is the Public Works Director. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So currently we're working with Jeff, Peter, as well as Mike on the resolution. And so our goal is, if the resolution continues to move forward today, our goal is then my goal is to take it to county council and have it jointly approved by council as well. As Jeff mentioned, the MRF project is moving forward. There's two components to the MRF project. One is the site, and that's right now at the, I would say, probably behind the Simmonsville drop-off center. There's a property that we would be acquiring, and then there's a county property, so we'd be combining those two to make that facility work. And so the site is being worked on. We're engaging with the A&E consultant right now to kind of do a site plan, a conceptual site plan, and we're working through some of that. The other component is the actual material equipment that sorts the recyclable goods. And so we're working with a vendor right now. In fact, staff is, because of my attendance here, they're working with the equipment provider to finalize that and to make a decision on the equipment as well. So once we pick the equipment, we'll be able to take the equipment with the sorting lines and the conveyor belts and then put it into the site as well. So it's kind of, everything's happening concurrently, and it's moving forward nicely.
What's the difference between the MRF and the convenience center?
So the
They're
convenience,
doing some separation at the convenience center.
there is at the convenience centers. Currently, we have recycling bins where citizens can come in and put recycled goods into the individual bins. At the MRF, the goods come in one pile and they're sorted at the center.
Oh, okay.
And that's the need for the equipment and whatnot and the assembly lines and the staff to kind of separate the goods.
Sounds like you're making progress. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Neil or Jeff?
How is this different, if at all, from the program just a couple of years ago where the town contracted with one garbage collection and then had to backtrack on that? I see Peter has some things that he's anxious to contribute.
You wanted a background on the process?
I'm just curious of what, if any, differences there are between this and that.
And Councilmember Becker, there are so many moving parts to this.
Yeah. Yeah, I was not involved in that, and like I say, I've heard, and I think Peter was wired in.
Yep.
And has firsthand experience.
And this is about efficiency and providing an environmentally sound service to our residents. Mm-hmm. And right now, the whole process is controlled by the Hickory Hill landfill that closes on 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. And part of the problem why that system failed is because, as I mentioned before, every short-term rental gets cleaned between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon for check-in. Well, where do you think all the trash goes? The landfill was closed. There's no place to put the trash. You can't move it on a Saturday even out of the convenience center. They stop. And in fact, there were days when they had to close it because they had no place to put it. They ran out of capacity. And the difference between the MRF and the convenience center is they reduce it. They take the plastic and they compress it and bale it. They take the glass and they crush it. And they make it much more convenient to transport. Having the MRF south of the Broad means that someone who's a trash hauler does not have to go all the way to Hickory Hill. The other piece of the crazy puzzle is forever you brought recycling to Hickory Hill, you paid a tipping fee. You bring trash to the landfill, the county picks up the tab. It's tail backwards. So there was no incentive to recycle. This MRF will give the county the opportunity to market that product directly without having the county process it and having to pay the county a fee to do it. It will be done by the county. It'll also reduce the turnaround time for a private hauler to dump their trash. It'll also mean it'll be open on Saturdays and Sundays because it'll be under the auspices of the county, not Waste Management. So much more efficient. And the reason why that failed is because it was a single hauler. The expectations were set way too high. The price was set, unfortunately, too low. It was a great idea, but the ultimate end was controlled by the Hickory Hill landfill. When you filled up a truck and it was 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, you stopped. You couldn't go any further. And the convenience piece of it, I have at least 6 trash haulers going through Hilton Head Plantation on a weekly basis.
Right.
Wear and tear on the roads, hydraulic oil spills, accountability, just efficiency. To have one trash hauler go through and do it all and have that accountability is just much more efficient. Now, this would be done under the county. It wouldn't be done under the town, but we need the county to partner. And having the convenience center here being able to take landscape waste and reduce it on site by expanding it. Again, you could probably come up with a usable mulch product that you may be able to even market and give away or deliver, or reduce it to an amount where you can haul it at a much more efficient rate. Is it all about, you're carrying right now from the convenience, mostly air.
So a couple of questions, more questions, since you have all the great information to share with us. In terms of the cost, In terms of the cost, currently, some of the trash haulers on Hilton Head will charge an extra fee to cover the recycling. And so for those,
I pay Mike to recycle for all of our commercial recyclables in Hilton Head Plantation.
right, so individually, each homeowner can make that choice, like, at least with our company, you can. And then, but it does concern me going back to the question with contamination and the perception maybe, or the reality, that the garbage gets picked up and put into one truck altogether. And then that, and the way I had previously understood it, that contamination literally happens with the very smallest amount of crossover. So how does that piece get solved and prevented?
Well, if you have one trash hauler, you have much more accountability. And the town actually, believe it or not, has the ability to fine if someone doesn't recycle the right way. I don't think I don't think that's ever been used in my lifetime or Jeff's lifetime. But the key is financial. The incentive isn't there to do it. So it needs to be reversed. You need to have a tipping fee for a charge for the trash and encourage the recycling. And I think both the haulers and the residents will be much more conscientious about doing it if they know that the more they put in recycling, it's going to be a lower fee. But the more they put in trash, it's going to be a higher fee, and it needs to be incentivized that way. And I think you'll see a big turnaround.
Has there been any analysis in terms of that cost, what the cost would be under this plan versus
that would be a question for Mike better than
well, just overall, from if you're paying your monthly trash pickup fee, which we've only gone to recently because we managed to do our recycling and garbage at the convenience center, but most people who pay that monthly fee for their garbage collection and their recycling, that additional fee, how would that cost compare to a new cost under this county plan?
The short answer, there has not been an analysis. That analysis will come when we did the MRF's design on capacity, hauling, and then when the contract comes up. You can't really put an analysis on without knowing the logistics of it.
Okay, so no rough estimates, no ideas whatsoever?
I mean, you could, no, I couldn't
Okay.
even put it in there. I don't do residential, I do commercial. But what you're touching base on is the complexity of this issue. Because the MRF, right, the MRF allows, a county-run MRF allows you to have standards. Once you have standards, you can uphold them. Once you can uphold them, now you can implement then your collection rates, your contamination rates, and things like that. And now you have a way of making sure that goes, that the recyclings are as clean as they possibly can, and a reporting feature. Right now, there's no standards. You know, there's a million different haulers doing a million different things. Nobody's reporting. It's not fair that people are paying and not getting reported to if they're doing it right. You know, there's a lot of and the issues are multi-level and complex. But.
I think these are the times to ask all those questions, to have those issues identified so we have some rough idea so that, unlike before when questions weren't answered and it was a failure, that if we proceed, that it's a success. And we know what we're getting ourselves into.
And the key is control and to make it more efficient and incentivize recycling over putting your solid waste in the trash bin.
No, understood. I understand that. That's absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all for answering my questions. I appreciate
about
that.
The collaboration we've had with Neil and Cindy at the county, and Jeff and Mike. And Jeff is absolutely accurate. We meet on a monthly basis, and we solve all the problems of the world.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? Any public questions or comments? Mike.
Because you started the conversation, I do want to kind of emphasize. I think you know, when we talk about the complexity of the issues actually have been identified, and these resolutions that are coming forward are steps in them. It is complex, but if you'd like a different report on actually literally the issues that come down the line, that would be another time for another place. But they have been identified. We actually do know them, and this resolution that's about to come forward is addressing those step by step. When we explain, I'll step back up when the after the resolution's been you know, discussed, and we'll talk a little bit more. But they are addressing those issues, you know, singularly in a step-by-step form.
Well, I, for one, would love if there's additional data and reporting on that to have it so that I'm fully informed. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Mike. If there is no other discussion, that then segues into our Patsy.
Patsy Bryce, I'm one of the experts to talk first. I just rise in support of the resolution and with thanks to the SAC of the GIC to help us carry forward part of the strategic action plan. So I rise in support. Thank you.
That segues into our final agenda item, and that is the proposed resolution. And I think the resolution we have, Jeff, is born out of a draft resolution from GIC.
Yes, sir. Resolution in the packet. Don't really have a presentation, so to speak, but what was in your packet was put together by the Sustainability Advisory Committee of the GIC. A resolution came forth back in the spring that was approved by Town Council back in March. How is this one different? This new resolution mainly focuses to support initiatives on the south of the Broad Murph, which you've been hearing about, capabilities to process and dispose of, or I shouldn't say dispose, right, Mike? Process and redistribute of recyclable materials, organic waste, reducing waste deposited in the waste management's landfill. Also looking at initiatives for a single stream recycling and organic waste haulers for single family residential properties to reduce the number of the trucks on Hilton Head. You know, Peter mentioned the county could manage that. That's to be determined. The town could manage that. There's different ways to go, but they have a division department that deals with solid waste. One of the other items in the resolution to improve and expand the Hilton Head Island Convenience Center to include recycling and composting of organic materials. That's what Peter was mentioning, you know, the yard waste, et cetera. Composting can be a messy business, I'm sure, when you look at wildlife and how to protect it and keep things neat and tidy. And then consider expanding the Hilton Head Convenience Center into a solid waste and recycling transfer station. It essentially acts as that now. Neil mentioned they have the bins segregated for glass, paper, aluminum, et cetera. But if that facility could be made bigger and better to do more, that could help benefit the whole program. And if you gentlemen have anything to add about the resolution or not?
I think what we have before us is the recommendation to forward a proposed resolution to Town Council with the GIC resolution attached.
Yes, sir.
And that it be adopted by Town Council. Any questions or comments from the committee? Alex.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know what this resolution actually does as far as the action between the county and the town. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is already being worked on. So I'm curious to know what does this do for us? What does this really get us?
It is to support and encourage the efforts of the town and county. So I would say guidance and support and encouragement of the Greater Island Council for Neil and us and County Council and Town Council to work together to do better with regards to solid waste and recycling management within the area.
So
that's
the MRF.
So yeah, I wouldn't say anything binding necessarily, but it's more guidance and encouragement to do these things, if that makes sense. Is that fair?
Alex, these are setting up the tools that we're going to need to ultimately and hopefully set up a residential program that's far more efficient. And the mayor, probably well over a year ago, came to us and said, look, this is not something that staff or the council can do alone. We'd really like you guys to take the lead on this and bring us back, you know, information and work that we can adopt. And this is exactly what we're doing. We have worked tremendously collaboratively with the county, and that was an ask. And getting these down to these fine points on a collaborative basis and asking about the convenience center being expanded in the future, the MRF, support for that by the town, Those are all key pieces to this, so that eventually we will get to a much more efficient system. And if we go to, whether it's the county or the town, to a single hauler system where everybody gets a residential service, it is not going to fail because the right tools were not in place. This puts those tools in place and makes it much more efficient.
Yeah, I got it. I appreciate the expertise that at the table. I guess where I'm going is I want to make, does the resolution passing here and at the county give us some absolutes that the discussion continues and that the reporting will continue to come back
I will
before this
continue
body?
to annoy you with this item for as long as you'll put up with me.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm just going to make one general comment because I keep hearing the expansion of the convenience center here. And I want to make sure that I'm on record that if anything were to expand or to be redeveloped there, that the town will remain cognizant of the residents first policy. That convenience center is around neighborhoods and around people's lives. And so that first, and then we accommodate what we can with the convenience center, but always keeping in mind those folks who are residentially positioned around the convenience center.
Well said.
Yes.
And there is enough property around there, Councilmember Becker, to do that efficiently. And there were originally plans, and then there was a little spat between the county, as you know, about the longevity of that center. And I think something like this type of expansion would ensure the longevity of that particular item. And Councilmember Brown, you brought up a while ago about recycling and being allowed with, and personally, I use it, and I've seen exactly what Jeff has said, and I want to commend Jeff for working with the county to get that station moved up in front of where the trash is put out so that people can come in and recycle whether they have the decal or not. Mm-hmm. That has happened.
Sure. My only question on the resolution is because I guess this is a message to our friends.
No, but you were right before. They were positioning themselves right at the gate.
My friends at the county, I think that this is an ongoing discussion that should be happening without a resolution being in place. It's just a natural and right thing to do.
That's just common sense.
Absolutely. Yep.
And we just ask you to support this resolution so we can continue to work with the county. They will bring the same resolution to the county council, and we will support that and get it passed. And it's just working together to get these tools in place so we can provide a better service to our residents.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we move this resolution forward to the town council with a recommendation that the town council adopt this resolution.
Thank you. It has been properly moved. Is there a second? Any additional comment from the public? Mike.
So, the resolution.
Yeah.
And your point is exactly spot on. This isn't a resolution of firm action. It's not a resolution of action. It's a resolution of support. And it's really the town stating that we're going to take a leadership role in the county and work in conjunction with them on these 4 steps that as a county and as committees have developed to work through the issues and then the proper steps moving forward. I think it is a great signal. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been on the island for a while. And it's a great signal. It's the first signal that I've seen that the town is really moving forward in really trying to look at this issue, solid waste and recycling, and throwing actual efforts toward, putting Jeff on this and things of that nature, where they're really actually showing physical support towards it. This resolution just pushes that forward and says, you know what, we are going to take a leadership stance. We're going to move forward. Recycling is one of the most visible things we can do as a town, as a community, as a county, that if we can perfect it and get it right, it's very marketable, it's the right thing to do. I mean, there's numerous benefits to it. And so the town stepping up and taking that position, I feel is hugely important. Obviously it's Hilton Head, it's, in Beaufort County, and I think it's an opportunity that we shouldn't pass up on. So I definitely appreciate the support on it, and we're definitely looking for it. We're working hard behind the scenes to make this happen and to fix a lot of problems that have been ongoing for many, many years. And this is literally just a show of support. So I would move that you guys take a look at this and move it forward to the town for approval so that we can move it to county and keep onward and upward and get this problem solved. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say one more word of recognition. Sally McGarry is here, and she is part of our committee. She's also a wonderful moderator with the League of Women Voters, and just wanted to have her recognized as here for supporting us.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that hasn't been recognized yet? If so, please stand up. We will recognize you. I think the power of this resolution is the collaboration between the entities. GIC, the county, thank you, Neil, and town, thanks for your leadership, Jeff. If there are no other comments, would you call the roll, Krista?
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown?
Support.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Stanford?
For the motion.
Mr. Lennox?
Yes.
Motion carries, sir.
Thank you. Is there any other business to come before this committee?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.